really kind of top heavy with the Eagles and the Commanders. But moving into the AFC North, we have the Cincinnati Bengals at a B plus. So, Dobbs, how do you feel about how the Bengals addressed their offseason? It was kind of interesting because it didn't seem like they made a ton of splashes.
Yeah, no, not definitely not. I think how about for starters, I think the area I would say that I'm a little bit disappointed they didn't address more is I thought that they were going to do a little something to address the cornerback room. Didn't really do that. And if you're a Bengals fan, you might disagree with that. I know you got young guys, like I know DJ Turner, right? We haven't even given him a full year really. I get it. You want to see, and maybe it's just that's the logic, that's the thought process from the Bengals. Talk about the good stuff though, right? Look, I love the fact that they added Geno Stone is like one of the most underrated moves of the entire offseason that like nobody talks about for some reason, right? Von Bell about it getting back is huge. I think, here's something though again that's been looming that I think that nobody's really talking about for whatever reason. I'm still going to be want to talk about it. If Trey Hendrickson ends up getting traded, right, all of a sudden the D line is going to take a huge, huge bump, and it's like who's going to be the guy to come in and fill that same production? So very quickly, right, the defense could this defense, start for a lack of a better term, can it really slow down a lot potentially? As far as the O line though, we can agree, adding Trent Brown was awesome, and then Amarius Mims to learn behind him was fantastic. Use of draft capital, that's all awesome. The T Higgins potential, I don't want to say replacement at this point because again, he's not the same skill set, but getting Jermaine Burton out the draft, knowing you're probably not going to have T Higgins for more than another year,
My
was
favorite pick in the
great, great
draft.
value.
My favorite pick in the
Just,
draft.
just fantastic value. Again, Zach Moss too, a guy who I think is going to very much overproduce to the expectations of this offense. I think he'll be able to take that Joe Mixon role and play it really well. And it's just about really, as Bengals fans know, you keep Joe Burrow healthy this year, along with the fact that I like most of the draft class from this season. It was a good offseason relative all in all.
Yeah, I really like the draft pick of Eric All too as a tight end. Like I think he can be that guy that they develop. I think the
Yes.
Bengals have been a team that has really been looking for like stability and like dominance at tight end. Like could you imagine if the Bengals had the TJ Hawkinson, how deadly they would be on offense? I think if they just run out this year with T. Higgins and Jermaine Burton is allowed to be your wide receiver 3, and obviously they used a third round pick on him, so that's pretty indicative of how they feel he can contribute, especially because he was off a lot of teams' boards because of the off the field issues. If you're able to trot out, Jamar Chase, Eric All, Jermaine Burton, T. Higgins, and they all be productive players for you, and I think Joe Burrow is definitely a player that elevates his team. The Bengals could make a strong effort to be in the Super Bowl again. Now, I do like the addition of Trent Brown, and like you said, with the Amarius Mims signing, what does worry me, like you, I think we have a lot of the same thoughts on this team, is if Hendrickson does get traded or Hendrickson is not on the team this year, that defensive line does take a step back. And we know, being in the AFC, when you're playing Patrick Mahomes, when you're playing Josh Allen, when you're playing all these great quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, even when you're playing Tua, if you can't get to the quarterback, it will expose a secondary, regardless if they're top tier or not. I think outside of having a great quarterback, essentially you really need to have an aggressive defensive line as well to make the quarterback get the ball out of his hands quicker. And that can go for any team, but especially when you're playing in a very quarterback heavy conference.
No, absolutely. And I just want to touch on too, because I didn't even say it, but back to Eric All real quick. Eric All is one of those guys where, yeah, let's talk about some of the biggest sleepers in the draft and also just where they went to the perfect spot. Eric All, when you're watching the tape, is kind of one of those guys where you're like, this guy could really develop into that QB's best friend kind of role. Always coming back to the ball. He's always patient with the routes. And on top of that, for his size especially, relatively a really, really solid blocker. So I think he can come in this Bengals offense and just really kind of take over that tight end one role much quicker than a lot of people might expect. He really could be one of Joey B's new number one kind of target. Obviously not going to be the number one target. Very likely. But he could definitely produce much heavier than a lot of people are expecting very quickly.
Moving into the Cleveland Browns, we have them with a B. So overall, I think they are still suffering from that Deshaun Watson deal because it's another year without a first round pick. And I do like what they did a lot with their second round pick, taking Michael Hall Jr. I do like the addition of Zach Zinter, Jamari Thrash. Looking at their offseason, I just find it so funny. Like, if you look at their free agent class and you look at their draft class, this is the most like Browns offseason ever. Like, what was exciting about their offseason outside of like the overpaying of Jerry Jeudy? This was such a weird offseason, and I really did not like the Jeudy deal. Obviously, you bring back Zadarius Smith, Devin Bush, Jordan Hicks. Like, they did what they needed to do on defense, like they always do. But I don't know if they did really anything to put that offense over the hump. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know.
No, I think I would have really liked to see more investment into the O-line depth because we're at a point where, and again, a lot of brands, I said brands, a lot of Browns fans will tell you, look, the reality of the situation is at this point, I think the jury is more out on Jedrick Wills than it is in, where a lot of Browns fans are starting to look at Jedrick Wills like the weak link. So the fact that you didn't address any type of real, guys with upside enough to take over that starting role is a little bit concerning, especially when we look at Deshaun Watson as, if he's going to get back to being that guy that we know he used to be, it's going to take that same comfort and that same level of trust in his O-line he used to have back when he had an amazing blind side.
Let me ask you this. Do you think there's a chance that they move DeJuan Jones to left tackle?
At this point, you would be throwing your best five out there. And there's actually not even a doubt about it. Like, that's, to be honest, actually, matter of fact, let me take a look at the,
he's backing up Jack Conklin at right tackle now. But
see,
with the way DeJuan played last year.
Yeah, if you're the Browns, what are you thinking? Because, yeah, no, tape doesn't lie on Jedrick Wills, and more than anything, Browns fans won't lie to you. It's not going to work much longer if he keeps playing at that same standard. And to me, DeJuan Jones gives you just better upside in general at this point. He's an absolute tower of a man. I know, as we always say, the switch from the left to the right's not easy, but I think for a guy as athletic and just rangy as DeJuan is, a guy like him, it'll make it about as easy on the transition as it could be. So
I guess my thing is, like, we don't even really need to talk about the defense because the defense is not the problem. The offense, I like Jamari Thrash, and I think he can be a good player. But when you look at their wide receiver core, it's really fucking weak. Like, it really is. Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and then you have David Bell, Jamari Thrash, Cedric Tillman. Like, outside of Amari Cooper, you don't have that dominant receiving core. And yes, you have Njoku, who I like, but he really wasn't the same player he was with Watson that he was with Flacco. So we know what the Browns, they love to run the ball. They're a heavy run team. But you got to win through the air, and I don't know if you're doing that with just Amari Cooper.
Yeah, no, well, okay, that's so on top of that, and what I want to really say is this. I know, look, I'm going to get flack from the Browns fans, but I don't care because I'm always honest. Browns fans, to me, are way too over-optimistic about the Jerry Jeudy signing. And I actually know one personally, a good friend of mine who's a Browns fan, but it's like, I'm going to say it like this. Especially if you've been watching all 22 over the last 3 or 4 years. I don't know what you've seen from Jerry Jeudy that makes you think he's just going to make some enormous leap, especially with Deshaun, who he has no rapport with, who has been struggling. I just don't understand the capital that you guys invested in Jerry Jeudy, literally in the slightest. That's just the nicest way I can say it. That, to me, is the thing that single-handedly brings down the grade from them the most this offseason, because you could have done so much more with that money. To me, Jamari Thrash could have been genuinely filling his role this upcoming season, and you could have at least seen how much upside do we really have in Jamari versus, you know what I mean? The 50 whatever mil that you spent on Jeudy. I'm not a fan of it in the slightest. Not at all.
Especially when you have a super, super competitive division like the AFC North, and we have the Baltimore Ravens at an A-. So I did not have an issue with what they did in free agency. But I think their draft class was really kind of what carried their grade because I think, I don't know how you feel, and I'll let you kind of run with this one. I think they did everything necessary in free agency, but I think their draft class is where they really addressed all their issues. I think there are still some question marks on the offensive line, but overall, Dobbs, how are you feeling about the Ravens this upcoming season?
No, I think, look, the thing is this, I used to give the man a lot of shit. I say I'm always an honest man. I always come around when it's time to come around. Eric DaCosta, right? I was wrong. I understand the vision of how you build your teams. I am starting to completely understand why you go about things the way you guys go about things, right? I see the Ravens' vision clear, crystal clear. I think, though, the one thing that we'll agree on is look, this team has built a roster about as well as you can build a roster. The issue comes in for me personally, where again, you just haven't given Lamar his alpha dog. Where again, I love I love Zay Flowers as a complementary piece, as just a slot beast, so as a seam burner. Love him in that role. But I don't know if Zay Flowers is ever going to be a 1,400, 1,500, 1,300 plus, yard kind of guy who can really dominate and take over in those cold November, December, January, February nights. And again, could he? For sure. But, and especially after we saw in the playoffs last year, I think that that's the thing that the Ravens are really missing right now. And like we said, with the guy that they took, taking Devontae Walker, you kind of just took another guy that you already have an entire room full of. Guys that are burners, but the hands are inconsistent. The route tree is not very developed. So that's really the only thing about the Ravens you can sit here and question. But outside of that, look, they planned ahead with, I'm going to butcher his name. I'm going to learn here over time. With Almuvai Luau, I'm trying my best to pronounce it, but their guard that they drafted last year who sat the whole season, he's going to play starting left guard this year, at least according to the depth chart. So if he comes in and he plays really well, you have a line of guys that are all very, very competent, good guys across the line. I guess you could say, though, the guard situation is far from being set, but at least you have guys that you're confident in will be able to do their job. Right. This defense is very, very stacked relative to the rest of the league. I mean, they've done a great job. Trenton Simpson coming and taking over that spot for Patrick Queen, who, if he can play how he did when he got reps last year, will be able to come in and replace him very well. Right. Like the Ravens have done everything they need to do in terms of thinking ahead, staying a step ahead. They've done it. They've done all that. Now it's just a matter of really, and again, it goes against all my philosophies, but for a team like the Ravens, when you have a quarterback like Lamar, I think it's the one time where the contingency comes in place where it is a little bit different, where it's like that's the one thing we have to monitor. Is this receiving core enough for the way that they play ball and the style that they play to be able to take you all the way? To me, that's the biggest question that we have to see answered from the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Henry signing was great. Obviously, they lose J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, which, in my opinion, they'll be fine. I do like Keaton Mitchell a lot if he can get back to being healthy. The Justin Madubuike signing was something that they needed to get done. I do really
Critically
think
underrated.
the Josh Jones signing is very underrated. I think Josh Jones can play starting tackle in the league. And we know outside of Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Lindenbaum, they're kind of playing musical chairs right now with the offensive line. Now, getting Nate Wiggins and also TJ Tampa in the draft, I think is great. Roger Rosengarten, obviously, mixed opinions on him. I think he can be valuable for them. And Idisa Isaac.
Listed as the starter on the depth chart right now, worth noting.
Oh, Roger Rosengarten? Yeah, they must be
right
really
now
high
he is
on
currently
him.
starting over Falele on the right tackle spot as of right now.
I really like Tampa. I think here's what I will say. Outside of getting a more dominant pass catcher on this team, the Ravens knocked this offseason out of the park because they pretty much addressed everything they needed outside of a dominant wide receiver. So you obviously can't get everything done. Like in most of these teams, they're missing one thing, and that's fine because at the end of the day, you can't get everything done. So overall, the Ravens did what they need to do, and maybe they go out and trade for somebody later on. Well, who knows? They're not really keen to trading for people giving up a ton of capital, but overall, I think they did a good job this offseason. So,
No, absolutely.
finishing off the AFC North, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers with an A minus. So I really like their draft class. I did not like their free agency class all that much. Um, and, you know, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, it's going to be a quarterback kind of carousel. I know Russ is probably going to be the starter, but as soon as Russ plays a bad game, it's going to be, oh, put in Justin.
The
And
writing's on the wall.
I think the biggest thing about the Steelers offseason that I really, really, really just did not like, they did not address wide receiver that well. Van Jefferson, Cordero Patterson, George Pickens, Roman Wilson. That is who Russ, outside of Pat Fryermuth and Najee Harris, that is who Justin Fields or Russell Wilson is throwing to. I think they did a great job addressing the offensive line. They did an amazing job addressing the offensive line. But another thing was receiver. They traded Deontay Johnson, and they just didn't really get an answer for it. So overall, I think the defensive line is also getting older. I don't know if they addressed that enough. Peyton Wilson's a dog, but he may only play off his first contract because he only has, I think, one functioning ACL.
And he's already midway through his 20s. I mean,
It's just a tough thing where it's like the Steelers have talent, but their future seems kind of short-sighted. Just with the way that they are built. I like Mason McCormick, too, as a developmental piece for their offensive line, as a depth piece. But it's just, okay, realistically, let's say Justin Fields doesn't pan out and Russell Wilson is not your guy. Where are you in 2 years? TJ Watt's older. Hayward is older. You don't have really a solution at wide receiver. I just don't know where you go from here with the Steelers.
And see, I'm going to try to give you some clarification of how I feel about it, because I agree. Everything you're saying, don't get me wrong, we literally are in full agreement, especially about the receiving core, everything. I think, and this is the thing, is Steelers fans are not going to want to hear this. I'm going to prepare for the comments on this one. But I'm also incredibly objective and realistic at all times. You know me. I'm not going to sit here and fray away from what I believe is the truth. I think the truth is the Steelers know, especially the Steelers front office. Realistically, right now, their best chance to be able to win in the immediate future is okay, on the assumption that Justin makes some huge leap and ends up being the guy for us that the Bears thought he could be for them, right? Oh my goodness, we can actually be in the thick of things and really figure things out quickly. But if not, I think this draft really tells a story where the reality is they're doing things the way I always say that you should do things, where it's not flashy and it's pretty ugly right now. But down the road, when it comes time to find that quarterback, if assumedly as we are right now, Russ or Justin is not that guy for you long term, whoever that young guy steps in is going to be, they're going to step in where they are going to have 4 or 5 actual really good linemen around them. So I think when you look at it like that, it makes a lot more sense. That's really the only way I can really think of how the Steelers' future looks right now, is that they're really thinking years ahead, where it's like, we really probably don't have the guy in the building right now. So let's make sure that when we have that guy in the building, he doesn't come into an Aaron Rodgers situation where we have the guy, but he can't even stay healthy because we haven't provided him with enough around him.
Yeah, I get that.
I mean literally around him.
I just struggle because a lot of their key pieces on defense in terms of that line are getting so much older, but I don't know. I don't know. Like I get what you're saying though. The offense is setting up nicely for a younger quarterback to come in and take its place. So I get that. I do. Maybe it's just kind of a renovation of how we're used to the Steelers. Maybe they're starting to kind of look to offense to lead the team. I don't know if that'll ever happen. I'm finally seeing it with the Bears, so maybe the Steelers are making their way around. But overall,
Steelers competitive rebuild incoming.
Yeah, I mean, overall, if you're a Steelers fan, you got to be really happy with the draft class. I think you guys killed it. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And they had a few good, like real quick, just they had a few good free agent guys too. Like I think getting Deshaun Elliott was another huge, really flew under the radar, but he's going to play real nice in the Steelers defense. Like it was certainly not all bad, and there was plenty of good on side of it. I just think, bottom line too, Van Jefferson as your wide receiver 3, you're not helping out the quarterbacks in the room currently. It's far from a finished product.
All right, well, that'll wrap up the AFC North.